Because, oh, wait, we're on. Never mind.
What did you say now?
Well played. Well played.
Wow. That was, I don't know, man. I don't know. A call to CPS is in the works, I think.
Yeah, right?
All right. Welcome to the Lovecraft eZine podcast. I wear a fez now. Fezzes are cool.
You know, it was, sorry, this is going to sound bizarre, but I really thought I should be wearing a fez for Bartlett. I don't know why, but I
really
just felt
did?
like, yeah, I know, in all seriousness, because I thought I'll wear a silly hat, and I thought it
There are
should be
two
a fez.
fezzes now.
Are you saying my
But I
hat is
don't-
silly?
I'm saying your fez is really, it's frightening, because Bartlett's stuff is really frightening.
My son's girlfriend gave it to me because she heard me talking about Doctor Who. So that was
So
nice
she
of
was
her.
trying to like worm her way into your good graces.
Yeah.
Like, here, have this fez. It's lined with a contact poison.
Well, she treats my son right, so she's already there. So.
Okay, all right.
Welcome to the Lovecraft eZine podcast, everybody. Well, we've got Matthew Bartlett for our guest today. Hey, Matt, how are you?
Good evening. Good. How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Why don't we do introductions and then let's talk to Matthew Bartlett. So, Bridget, why don't you go first?
Hello.
Oh my God, Pete, you got a fez too?
Yeah, it's Fez Day, apparently. You know,
Oh, wow.
Okay.
So I run all the way downstairs, and I look at the rack of hats. I'm like, where's my fez? My wife says, it's in the bedroom closet in the container of old backpacks. Like,
Right.
one, what is it doing there?
To be thrown away, she wanted to know.
Two, how do you know that?
I
Well,
know.
at least you have a wife who knows where she puts the things.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Many of us have the opposite.
anyway, how?
Bridget, why don't you introduce yourself?
And where the hell is your fez?
I don't have a Fez. I'm sorry, I'm not as cool as you guys, but I'm still glad I get to be on here anyway. Hi, I'm Bridget. I write music and make art things and love horror.
All right. John Langan.
I don't have a fez, but I have German Godzilla. So, hi, everybody.
Arguably even cooler.
Even cooler. I mean, I suppose I could try to wear him on my head. Maybe I'll try to do that. I'll have a fez.
Well, you know,
some kind of little platform made with him, but you couldn't really see him like this.
a few weeks
So,
ago, you were balancing books on your head, so I bet you could do it.
I will get you, Davis.
You're
I'm
still
sorry.
balancing books on your head. Look at this guy. Pete, you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Pete Rollick, and I am a failed literary writer. So I've reverted to writing pulp fiction.
There you go. Who we got left? Rick.
Rick Lay, another failed literary writer who doesn't have a Fez or a Godzilla, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
We got to fix that.
What, you have a little Cthulhu?
You have a
figure.
Cthulhu fez, Matt?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
cool.
like, yeah. That's right. Let's see.
And I got all these Cthulhu stuff pins on it, like
This-
that I have nerdily collected over the years. Do you
Wow.
even have a tassel?
Yeah, Mike, where's your tassel?
I don't. I'm sorry. I feel so ashamed. I don't
So
have a tassel.
you really don't have a fez. You just have a round cap.
No, it's a fez. It's
That
a
could be
fez.
an elf's hat for all we can see.
Yeah.
Here. We don't see the
It
top.
is dark.
That's true. He could be an elf, couldn't he?
Mr. Cthulhu Fez, you want to introduce yourself and talk about this
Okay.
week's prize?
Okay, now this is a copy of the graphic novel Killing Pickman, which is really a wonderful noirish story about a detective who is tracking down a notorious child killer, Richard Upton Pickman. It is a library copy, a former library copy, so there are stickers on it. But, if you figure out how, you can probably remove them without damaging the book, and the contents are pretty darn good. So if you want to win Killing Pickman, send an email to ezineprizes@gmail.com and put Pickman in the subject heading. We usually draw a winner in about 3-4 weeks. So you got plenty of time to enter.
So to get those stickers off, I use a hairdryer set on a cotton setting.
So what Pete is saying is you send him the book, he'll remove the stickers and then forward it back to you.
No,
Thanks.
I'll
Thank
send
you,
you
Pete.
back the stickers. I'll keep the book.
DeBronzo says on the live chat, nice lid. And now 3 of us have the same lid, more or less. So anyway, Matthew Bartlett is our guest today. Hey, Matt.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Matthew Bartlett is a writer and a very good one. And Matt, tell us a little bit, just a short bio, and then we'll go from there and talk to you about your books and so forth.
Okay, sure. My debut book, Gateways to Abomination, came out in 2014. It was a self-published book that I had been writing for almost 10 years, very sporadically on and off on a blog, and ended up putting it out as a book. Since then, I've appeared in a variety of anthologies, had a couple more books come out, small press, self-published, that kind of thing. I also have a couple of records with Cadabra Records, with me reading with background music, and currently a full-time writer.
Yes, Pete.
No, I said yay.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, before we go on, anybody here? You guys hear about this Utah monolith thing?
Yeah.
Did you guys read about that?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a couple years old.
Not anymore. It's not.
It's gone now.
It's
yeah.
gone.
Yeah,
This
because
is just
it's illegal.
this is
it's
just a
illegal to
really
erect a
weird
monument.
story.
Yep.
I mean, it's
Somebody
out there.
just-
What, Rick?
Somebody just dumped it out there for whatever reason.
Well, they didn't dump it. Apparently, they planted it in the ground. And then, so this story comes out, last week, a few days ago, about this monolith that they found in the desert. You know, at which point every Lovecraftian on the planet's ears pricked their ears. So, and then I'm reading this morning, and they're like, it's gone mysteriously. This is just.
Okay, what were the dimensions of the monolith? If it was like 1 foot thick, 4 feet wide, 9 feet tall,
Something like that.
that's important.
Well,
That was the size of the monolith to the most infinite decimal points. It was perfectly proportioned, 1 by 4 by 9, folding into other dimensions as you went through it.
yeah, exactly. But with all the attention on this monolith, how do they remove it without anybody knowing where it went? It's just one of those truth is stranger than fiction stories. I find
Obviously,
it's
someone
a
went
big
through it.
desert.
I'm sorry?
Someone went through it and then it vanished.
Yeah, I guess. So,
I don't know. It's got nothing on the Leeds monolith, which, as I recall, was made of beef gelatin and scraps of jerky and an occasional entombed leech.
That one's still here,
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
so it's not too mysterious.
Nobody wants to go through that. Yeah.
No, that's like Scrapple or.
Pretty much. Yeah. I mean, the Leeds Scrapple monolith. That's how it's known.
I actually had Scrapple this morning for breakfast, as a matter of fact. That's true.
It's
A scrapple monolith would not, in Peoria, a scrapple monolith wouldn't last a day.
Didn't somebody build a monument to Agathoth once?
once.
only
once.
once.
Yeah, I do remember seeing that there was a small monument to, I think it was Azathoth, that showed up like a couple streets down from like some courthouse or something. And then it moved around for a couple weeks.
Yeah,
and
I
then it
vaguely remember that. Well, anyway, before we move on to Matt, the other thing I wanted to mention is that we have a new perk for my patrons at the $10 a month and up level. For the $5, you get to listen to all the Patreon only podcasts, and then at $10 and up, the new perk. Well, $10 and up, you can hang out with us once or twice a month when we do just hanging out with the panelists, not recorded, not broadcast, just us chatting. But the new feature for $10 and up Patreons is occasional short stories by authors. And the first one was by Pete Rollick, never been read before, except by the patrons. Thank you, Pete. Pete also gave me the idea for this. The next one coming up is by Rick Lay. Thank you, Rick. I'll have that out in a week or so. And then I've got a couple of others lined up too. So yeah, thanks guys. And just Google Lovecraft eZine Patreon if you want to keep my lights on. I'd sure appreciate it. And then at the higher levels, there are even more perks. So anyway, Matt Bartlett, how are you?
I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
I'm good. So you self-published your first book in 2014. And then first of all, what made you want to do that? And then what was your journey next? Because you're not self-publishing everything now, right?
Right. Some things I am, but I had been writing this piece as a blog for a long time, as I said. And in, I think it was 2010, I self-published a hardcover book using a website called Blurb. It was not connected to Amazon, and it was something I ended up just selling to a few friends. It wasn't quite vanity publishing, but if you wanted a copy, you had to pay for it. The author had to pay for it. So that was like a first foray. Then I went to Necronomicon in 2013, my first Necronomicon. And as often happens, I think when people go there, you get very much inspired by seeing writers all around you and wanting to be a part of this world. So I looked into self-publishing, which in 4 years or 3 years had come a very long way. And I started to put together the book to release using CreateSpace on Amazon. I moved very slowly with it. I had 3 separate copy editors look at it. My wife did the cover art, which I then gave to a person I know in Northampton named Tom, who has a company called Standard Design. He designed the cover, and it went live in July of 2014, and slowly began to find its people. So after that, I realized that the book was composed of very, very short vignettes, pieces that all accumulated into a larger story, or puzzle pieces of a larger story.
Right.
And I thought, well, once people started to notice it, I wanted to get myself into anthologies, and I thought, well, I better teach myself to write longer stories. So the next year or so was just spent kind of trying to put together more traditional non-vignette short stories. So now I do kind of a mix of the two.
Well, I think it's a really good example of, there's less of a stigma now about self-publishing, but the stigma that exists, part of it is there for a reason, because there's a lot of crap that's self-published. But yet there's some diamonds in the rough that are self-published as well, which yours being a case in point. And it's a good way to get your name out there. You said you had copy editors look at it and everything. I mean, you did it right, as well as quality stories, obviously.
Thank you.
That's step one.
I didn't know what I was doing really much at all. And I also didn't know the depth of the stigma against it. And I don't know I guess it's possible that if I had known, that I might have not done that. But what people were telling me is that since these stories were already quote unquote published on a blog, no publisher would touch them. So I felt like I had no choice but to self-publish, and that's what I did. And thankfully it worked out.
And that is true. That's a good point for any beginning writers out there. If you've published a story on your website or your blog or Facebook or whatever, that's considered published.
Right.
And, if a publisher takes it, it's considered a reprint. And, a lot of publishers aren't looking for reprints. So, but anyway, let's talk about Gateways to Abomination and move on from there. And guys, please feel free to jump in with questions for Matt, because I'm sure you'll have questions that I won't think of. But let me just read something from the Gateways to Abomination synopsis. Bizarre radio broadcasts luring dissolute souls into the dark woods of western Massachusetts. Sinister old men in top coats gathered at corners and in playgrounds, and so on. Now, this is something that's really fascinating to me, and I'd like to ask you about it, because apparently it fascinates you as well. This kind of this, I don't know if I'll say this right, but kind of this voice in the night, this mysterious voice in the night coming over a radio station, telling stories, or a talk show, sort of an Art Bell type of thing, but less mainstream, I suppose you might say. So, for example, Matt, have you seen the movie AM 1200?
I have not.
Well, you got to check it out. It's free to watch on YouTube. It used to be very hard to get a hold of, but the director put it on YouTube. It's a short film. It's about 40 minutes long, and I think just about every panelist here has seen it and would tell you that it's really, really worth the watch. And I think especially for you, Matt, it's worth the watch. I'm not going to give anything away, but and it's been a while since I've seen it. I need to rewatch it, but this guy's driving along in the desert at night, and he hears this radio broadcast coming at him. So, here we got several things that push my buttons. The desolate, where he's driving through the desert. He's driving through the desert at night, and here's this mysterious broadcast. So, and I won't say what happens after that, but it's just a really good short film. And by the way, when you watch it, you have to email me and tell me what you thought of it, buddy. So,
Okay, I can do that.
So, am I assuming correctly that this mysterious type of radio broadcast, that sort of thing, is fascinating for you as well?
It is. The impetus for starting that, or having that idea, was two things. First, a friend of mine on LiveJournal, which is where I started writing this work, started up his own fiction blog, and it was in a humorous vein. It was about a small town. It was excellent, and unfortunately, he stopped doing that. But I thought, I want to get in on this. I want to do something like that too. And I thought, well, I'm interested in horror. And at the time, I was listening to a lot of Joe Frank, radio monologuist, who passed away, I think, last year. But the best of his shows, some of them were like plays, radio plays, but some of them were monologues with a drone kind of noise running underneath them. And he had a very rich voice, a little bit processed. And sometimes the music would fade out and it would just be this voice. And even if you were in a lighted room, you felt like you were in the dark. And in fact, one of his shows was called In the Dark. And that really intrigued me. So I thought about combining that voice on the radio with horror stories. And I just kind of made it up as I went along.
Have you read Dan Simmons' Summer of Night?
I have not. That's on my list. Huge list.
Yeah, it's a good book. Well, one of the boys, his room is in the basement. He lives with his father. His father's the mother died some time back, and he's sort of made his little domain in the basement, and he loves lying there at night listening to talk radio from all over. So it's just fascinating for him. And I only mention it because if you've read that book, and when you do, that'll jump out at you too. So I'm sure.
And also I was inspired by the movie Talk Radio with Eric Bogosian from his play. And the movie Pump Up the Volume, about a guy with a
radio.
Yeah, I saw that in the theater. So
I did too, and it's a movie that absolutely would not work today.
New.
But it was this idea that radio is going to change the world because everybody can have a conversation, and not just one station or several stations being able to control the conversation, something like that. And we have that now in the form of the internet, of course.
We do. Yeah, and I like the sort of the fact that radio still exists. It's just kind of this thing from the past that there's still local radio stations. There are still college or experimental or pirate radio stations, and that idea was very appealing to me as well. I also like setting up the enemy of this pirate radio station as the FCC, Federal Communications Commission. I enjoyed the fact that they were. I also listened to Howard Stern a lot, and the FCC were absolute villains, fining him and all this, and so to set up kind of a fictional version of the FCC that includes religious men and ex-black magicians and shamans and things, and that's something I'm still kind of developing. But I like the idea of the federal government as a mystic villain, where the radio station itself is kind of a villain as well. So the forces of good are actually bad.
Yeah. I just realized something. John, I'm so sorry. I didn't ask you to introduce yourself.
You did. I remember German Godzilla.
Oh, I did? Okay. I thought I was wrong, but I thought I was wrong, but I was wrong about being wrong. So
though, I did want to ask Matt.
Please.
One of the things I was struck by, I think it was in Music for the Moldering. You have the FCC show up at the end, and all of a sudden I got this weird like David Lynch vibe. The way that like in Twin Peaks, the FBI, like there's Agent Dale Cooper, and obviously this guy is not Dale Cooper, but like he's so in the old series especially so just angular and straight looking, and yet he has all this occult knowledge, right? Where he's just like, well, that's just part of what you need to know if you're part of the bureau, and it struck me there was like a like, I don't know, it may just be coincidence, but it certainly struck me, if it is a coincidence, it's a fascinating coincidence to see those two things sort of bouncing off each other. That
had to be in there somewhere. I love Twin Peaks, David Lynch, very much. And in fact, in the most recent season of Twin Peaks, that third season, there was a very surreal episode that involved a radio station, and it was kind of thing like, if I had seen that absolutely would have been an inspiration for me. But yeah, I like the idea that the FCC in the next book is going to play a pivotal role in coming to the town and trying to shut down the occult broadcasts. And I've got all kinds of ideas for that one. I'm really looking forward to kind of making the FCC take center stage as a government / religious villain.
Well, the Lynch thing is really fascinating to me because I was looking through some of your stuff earlier today, and I was actually doing preparation, and I was, well, I was like, oh, it's Bartlett.
Feels special. Prepared, usually, like when he shows up, he's like, "Who's the guest again?"
Right. Usually, I'm just like, "What? Who are you? Isn't this the Me Show?" But there's a kind of similarity between the aesthetic and a lot of your stories, I think, anyway, and Lynch, where it's just like over the top right away, that it's just right from the get-go. This ice cream truck shows up, and all the parents just pass out, and all the kids run up to the truck, and we're like, no, don't run up to the truck. And the guy is horrible, and he's got long toenails that scrape on the floor, and we're like, this is not going to end well. and it doesn't, and it's everything is that there's this kind of fascinating like acceleration, I guess, that happens in the stories, which again I think of as very Lynchian, where Lynch will just boom, you're right there. There's no, it's not like for contemporary or directors who would be Lynch's contemporary, it's not like Carpenter, where Carpenter is following more of the kind of Stephen King, as it were, naturalistic, here's the town and here's everybody. Oh, and now the weird thing is going to happen. Lynch is like, blah. And so many of your stories are like, blah, in a good way.
You writers in your technical terms, John.
Exactly.
No, but
That's the famous Bartlett blah effect. Yeah.
But Leeds and WXXT are sort of like the Lake Wobegon for the Eldritch. Yeah.
That's awesome. I totally want to see this now. I want to see Bartlett as the host.
I want to use that as a blurb.
His own weekly radio show.
Lake Wobegon of the Eldritch. That's fantastic.
Welcome to Leeds. Where what would it be? Where all
half the children, all the children are Eldritch, and half of them are,
Right.
But no, it's just like, and we talked about this early on when I bought your book very early. I could easily see someone from Arkham driving west and tuning in to WXXT and thinking, oh, there's something worse than Dunwich.
Yeah.
And it's just, and then
folks in Dunwich are like, you don't go to Leeds.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, and but the funny thing is that even though it's a radio, their eerie radio broadcast, it's in many ways a kind of folksy horror. It's got that folksy feel to it. I would be perfectly comfortable, curling up next to the fireplace with a good book, listening to WXXT, and whatever weird music they're putting out. But at the same time, it's just this quiet, sneaking horror that slowly worms its way into your brain, and you're like, wait, what did he just say? And you go back and read that again, because we all do it. We all skim those pages, and it's just like, wait, I missed something here. Let's go back. Let's read that again. Now I got to go back further because it's starting to make weird sense. And they're great stories.
Thank you.
And they do somehow or another come together into an overarching narrative, and it's a wonderful production. And what how I feel about you, because you've read the story. I wrote a story for a tribute book, which will likely never see the light of day. Not the tribute book, my story, but
it should.
It's a fun look, but we're talking about you, not me. But we can talk about me later. Go. But you've done something really, really interesting with the genre and with text and drawing a reader into a narrative that's really an audio narrative but been put down on the page. And I think that's a real accomplishment.
Thank you. It was fun to write, and the way it kind of comes together for the reader is the way it came together for me, because I published those short pieces in order, and as things would occur to me, I'd circle back or make a connection to some older thing, and it was like a revelation as I went on that this is and could be connected into a larger story. It was really just meandering at the beginning, and so I think and I hope that the reader will have a similar experience where these stories seem disconnected and then they begin to cohere, but you never get the full picture, which hopefully will make you want to read more.
Now, also tied into
go ahead, Pete,
also tied into all this are your book catalogs.
Yeah, I had not long after Gateways came out, I wanted to do a real do-it-yourself project, so I created I have a fictional bookstore called Ann Gare's bookstore, and I put together a quote-unquote catalog of books that don't really exist, and my inspiration for that was largely that my wife's father had a storefront on ABE Books, and he wrote the descriptions for the books that he was selling, and they were in some cases more entertaining than the books themselves. So I tried to sort of emulate the telling a story about the book in summarizing the book that would be a whole story and would make you imagine what else would appear in the book. And that was so much fun to write. And a lot of those ended up in the book Creeping Waves, which is a sequel to Gateways to Abomination. But it just opens up these other possibilities where I could go off and write a story about the author of any one of those books, or put them in a story, down the line, which is just great fun to me to do these callbacks and make new connections. If I run out of, new ideas, I can mine the old ones and make them into something new.
Speaking of fictional books, in Gateways to Abominations, you created a book called Western Massachusetts Witch Cults and Covens.
Yep.
And then you proceeded to write what is apparently the same book under a different title.
Yeah.
The Witch Cult in Western Massachusetts.
Yes.
Volume 1.
Volume 1, yeah. Will there be a volume 2? I hope so. But that book, I was inspired by a chapbook by Orrin Gray. And I'm actually gonna grab it from my shelf. Give me a minute here.
While you're looking for that, for those out there who haven't read one word of your work yet, but they're listening to this and they're intrigued and they want to get into reading your stuff, I think a natural question for them would be, does this radio theme run through all of your books?
It does not necessarily. It is prevalent in Gateways to Abomination and Creeping Waves. It worms its way a little bit into Witch Cult in Western Massachusetts. And then I think it's mostly absent from the other books of Doomful Portent and The Stay Awake Men, which is more a collection of traditional old school horror or weird fiction. Mm-hmm. So it's there, but you can also, and it appears in a lot of short stories that hopefully eventually will be in a collection, but you can kind of enter anywhere and
right.
And kind of pick it up from there. You don't have to have read one particular book in order to understand another earlier book.
Okay.
But Witch Cult was inspired by Gardinell's Real Estate by M.S. Corley, who did the illustrations, and Orrin Gray. And you'll see that on each, there's a illustration and then a story to match it. So I was inspired by that, and then also by Roberto Bolaño's, I think it's called Nazi Literature in the Americas, which is fictional biographies. So I kind of melded the two ideas into these illustrated biographies of people who live in various towns in Western Massachusetts, and they're all, of course, into the supernatural in one way or another. And it's kind of a neat little book. It's short, very, very short. I find I enjoy kind of looking back at them and rereading them from time to time. They're like little mini biographies. They're a lot of fun.
What began your fascination with radio? The type of radio that we're talking about, and that sort of thing. How did this start for you as a person?
Probably as a young guy, about 14, 15 years old. There were two radio stations in Hartford, Connecticut area, and I lived in East Hartford, where they had the Comedy Hour and Dr. Demento. Those two shows were on kind of late at night, and I would listen to them. And a lot of times it would be off color. It felt a little forbidden. Also, it included stand-up, so this voice kind of talking. And when you're that age, you don't necessarily know what these people look like, so you're filling in the blanks with your imagination. Mm-hmm. And I think that kind of kicked it off, that, listening to spoken word and comedy performances on late night radio in the car after driving home from an evening with my friends, and feeling really, these just lights going on in my head. What is this? Where is this person talking? Who's he talking to?
Yeah.
And then, like I said, in the early 90s, someone gave me a cassette, and it's the perfect way to get something. If you get a cassette that it just has a scribbled name on it, and it was Joe Frank, and it was just a cassette of one of his radio monologues, and didn't know what he looked like. At the time, the internet was very young. I couldn't find anything. So it was the mystery. You begin to fill in the blanks yourself with who is this person and why is he saying these horrible things or these intriguing things, these searching stories that are sometimes border on obscenity and almost seem like really good literature.
Let me just throw this out there for those who don't know about it, and Matt, maybe you do, but you go to YouTube, you can find a lot of these interviews with the guy named David Pilates, and this is the guy who investigates the missing 411 cases. Have you heard about those, Matt?
I've not.
Well, basically, it's about people that just go missing, and obviously this happens, right? And even weird missing people cases, most of the time there's some sort of explanation that makes sense, right? But what he investigates is the ones that don't make sense. What I like about this guy is he does not draw a conclusion. In other words, he doesn't say, must be UFOs, or it must be this, it must be that. Basically, what he says is he lays out, this is what happened. I don't know what the answer is. But listening to those interviews on YouTube, that's a fun experience, especially, if you're in bed late at night or driving down the road late at night, listening to these, it's pretty cool. And I'll just throw a plug out there for a film on Amazon Prime called Missing 411, The Hunted. Now, I think there's another Missing 411 that has, like 1 or 2 stars. But Missing 411, The Hunted, I watched that a couple of weeks ago. Excuse me. And, I'm to me, evidence, I'm looking for evidence for things. I don't just believe things because they're fun to believe, And he lays out this stuff, especially, you could start with Missing 411, The Hunted. And there's some really intriguing cases, these hunters who have gone missing. And I've heard a couple of radio shows where he's done people in town that have gone missing. There's an article from about 6 or 7 years ago on Huffington Post, and the title of the article is "Never Be Last in Line," which is quite an intriguing headline, So yeah, check that stuff out and check out the interviews, because obviously with your work, you strike me as the kind of guy who would enjoy them. That and AM 1200. So
thank you. Yeah, I've written those down.
Good. You should write down everything I say, but not anything.
I have a transcript of the show should anyone need one.
Oh my God, we've reached that part of the show already. Usually it takes it's about the 1 hour and 20-minute mark, I would say.
Now we're at 40 minutes. It's time.
We're there early.
Yeah. So who else has questions for Matt Bartlett?
So Matt, you've recently thrown off the yoke of your oppressors. And
that's one way to put it.
well,
violent revolution.
Listen, okay, so for years now, I've been listening to you rant about your coworkers.
Mm-hmm.
And it was inevitable that this was going to happen. And, literally they sped up the process.
Mm-hmm.
You designed a way to get out, you initiated it, and then your coworkers just, sort of hit fast forward.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, great. But so now you are a full-time writer and you're doing a Patreon?
I have a Patreon, but I'm also launching a subscription chapbook series that I've linked to on social media where subscribers can subscribe to different tiers or levels where they get either just the basic chapbook, which again, this one is a little fancier than the Angare book catalog, and I'll show you. Actually, we can compare and contrast. The book catalog was a kind of put together on a Word document and printed out and photocopied at a copy shop. This one is
Standard
going to be
chapbook fare.
this one here. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this one is again that Oren Gray and MS Corley chapbook. So I want the subscription series to be a little more glossy and high quality. And
Matt, before I forget, how do people find this Patreon?
they can find it linked to on my Twitter.
Okay.
The URL is kind of annoying and long for the moment until I come up with something better. So right now, social media is the best way to find it on Twitter at Matt M. Bartlett.
I was going to say your Twitter is Matt M. Bartlett.
Yeah, and I can link to the Patreon on there, which is kind of a lot of autobiographical stuff and charting my course as someone who's trying to make a go of it with just writing for a while. I don't think it's going to be forever unless some major changes happen. But for the time being, I'm kept afloat by a combination of savings, income from books sold on Amazon, the Patreon, and now this subscription chapbook service, which also includes a certain tiers. Members will get a WXXT employee identification card.
Nice.
Paw prints of my cats on their chapbooks.
That link is also on Twitter?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm glad Pete brought this up because I was going to say, that you're no longer working at a quote unquote real job. And so, guys, if you're interested in weird fiction, go to Amazon, wherever, buy all Matt's books, get on his Patreon, keep him going. In other words, I mean, none of us, it's a rare person who gets rich, writing books, but we'd like to make a living at whatever creative thing we're doing, right?
Yeah.
So and I notice if you're on Amazon, folks, and you read Kindle books, these Kindle books are very, very reasonably priced. So yeah, check that out. I mean, Gateways to Abomination is $2.99.
Yep, that for the ebook, and there's also an audio book now on Amazon with John Padgett, who is one of my favorite writers, doing the reading.
Oh God, that guy can read too.
Can't he though?
Great voice.
He's definitely an extremely skilled and multi-talented individual, and his readings are phenomenal. And I was lucky.
I'm kind of fascinated by the relationship you guys have, to the extent that right at the last Necronomicon, you did this, I mean, now infamous reading together, back and forth with each other. And, I'm always fascinated by friendships among writers. It's maybe the drama is more in writers who hate each other, and we can talk about that in a minute. But what about you and Padgett? What's the story there? How did that relationship begin? I want to get to your action figure status in a minute, but we'll but Padgett first.
Sure. John and I had known each other. One thing I didn't know until I became a horror writer is that all you guys know each other, which I had no idea. And
we all live in one big house, Matt. And by the way, the rent is due.
Oh, I think I have the check somewhere in here. We'll get to that. But
enough of your. I'll gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger.
For a hamburger.
Yeah.
No, but John and I met at I think it was Necronomicon 2015. We had not corresponded, but known each other via social media prior to that. And I think we were both heading in different directions and passed each other and kind of waved at each other like, I'll talk to you later. We have to sit down and talk. And at some point we found ourselves sitting on a couple of easy chairs under the mezzanine in the Biltmore in Providence. And we just talked about Thomas Ligotti, who we both like very much and who John knows. and about writing and about what we saw in each other's stuff, because we're both sort of fans of each other. And we did say at some point we should collaborate. And then, lo and behold, maybe a year later, Robert S. Wilson from Nightscape wanted to put together this project that is now going to happen, where it's hardcover of Gateways to Abomination, a hardcover of John's Secret of Ventriloquism, and then a book of collaborations between the two of us, where we both collaborated on 4 stories together. The reading at Necronomicon 2019 was based on one of those stories that is the 2 characters writing letters back and forth to one another, which John and I wrote by sending emails back and forth to one another in character, and the
Nice.
only occasionally messaging each other on the side saying, a direction that maybe we'd like it to go in. And it just came out. It was so much fun to write, and I think it shows in the final product that we just had a really good time with it. And it came out really dark and strange, and with a really an ending that I really like to look back at now. It's a very strange story, and it's called the Latham Fielding Liaison, which is also the title of the book, which that box set should be coming out, I think, next month.
So the Legati connection, I mean, that does kind of fascinate me, because I don't know. I worry that maybe you get this a lot, that people are always like, oh, I see a lot of Legati in you, and you're like, oh my God, not with the Legati stuff again. But it's hard not to. It's hard, and since you raised the subject, what about Legati? Because you're very different writers in some ways, and yet it's kind of fascinating to me, and that you both achieved these remarkable reputations. I mean, Legati eventually did. I mean, Carolyn Graff did publish Songs of a Dead Dreamer eventually, but all his early stuff was in small press, independent press kind of stuff, and same thing with you. You've achieved, I think, a very well-deserved reputation, but doing a lot of self-published independent press, but I guess I'm as interested really in just what you respond to in Legati, like when did you, or how did you first encounter him, and what is it about his work that speaks to you?
I used to go to Borders Books in Manchester and meet a couple of friends of mine every Saturday, and each time I would grab the latest issue of Rue Morgue and just some random books from the horror section, and I'd bring them to wherever we were seated in the cafe, and we'd talk, and then we'd each look at our piles of books or whatever. And a lot of times I didn't, the horror books that I found at Borders didn't really do anything for me. And then one day I grabbed this book by Legati, who I'd never heard of. And it was The Shadow at the Bottom of the World with a scarecrow on the cover. And I opened it up to The Last Feast of Harlequin. And one paragraph in, I'm like, what is this? And why is it in Borders Books in Manchester, Connecticut? This is weird. This is unlike anything I've seen before. Obviously, it had a very heavy Lovecraft connection, and I started to read Lovecraft at the time, and it was one of the first writers where I read it and I thought I could do this. There's something here that connected. There's just something there that connected with me, and because it was so idiosyncratic and so different from your kind of standard Dean Koontz, say, sort of a book. It made me realize that there are no rules, and that you could really go your own way. And that was a major inspiration for me. And I don't love every Legati story. The first book I like sporadically. My favorite is Teatro Grotesco, that entire collection. My work is not yet done. When he's a little less obscure and more planted in something that looks like the real world, that's when it kind of, that's what I respond to the most. And some stories are probably have a heavy influence of Legati, and some don't.
I think something you just said really bears some emphasis about looking at Legati's work and it being so different than what you were used to, and you realizing that I can do this. I can go my own way. I don't have to follow, quote unquote, the rules. And I think that's something that every creator, writer, artist, whatever, needs to realize. You know, uh, I think it bears highlighting. So
It was freeing because, my template before that, as with almost everybody, I'm sure, is Stephen King. And when you read Stephen King stories, he has a sort of way where he seems to know everything. And there's plotting and character, and it's most of it seems carefully put together and informed by a knowledge of the way things work in the background in the real world. Whereas with Ligotti, he was so off the map and so strange, and he created his own world, and you didn't have to have the likable character and the plot of a bunch of people you sort of know from real life meeting up and facing an adverse circumstance. This was just out there. These were strange narrators, bizarre places that don't exist in the real world, and it really it blew everything wide open for me in terms of what was possible and what I could do, and then kind of work my way around towards more of a Stephen King sort of a thing. So I came at it through Ligotti.
I was going to read this today anyway because I came across it again this past week, and it hit me right where I live, as it does every time I come across it. And I think I'll read it now because of what you just said, Matt. And it's a quote by Charles Bukowski. And it applies to every creator out there, not just writers, artists, whatever you're doing, whatever your dream may be, And he wrote, if you're going to try, go all the way. Otherwise, don't even start. This could mean losing girlfriends, wives, relatives, and maybe even your mind. It could mean not eating for 3 or 4 days. It could mean freezing on a park bench. It could mean jail. It could mean derision. It could mean mockery and isolation. Isolation is the gift. All the others are a test of your endurance, of how much you really want to do it. And you'll do it despite rejection and the worst odds. And it will be better than anything else that you can imagine. If you're going to try, go all the way. There is no other feeling like that. You will be alone with the gods, and the nights will flame with fire. You will ride life straight to perfect laughter. It's the only good fight there is. And what you just said just now about finding your way, Matt, and being recently jobless, makes me think of this quote. So you only get one life, so make it yours, right?
You're right. And that actually was, believe it or not, my primary care doctor's feeling in general. Like, now is a time, there's a raging pandemic, and when we talked about this, it was not entirely unthinkable that Trump would have gone into another term. And it's like, everything has changed now. If there's a time to believe in yourself, strike out and try something, now is the time to do it. And right. I have a very good doctor, and she also, talked a lot about the stress that I was going through. And so just all these, it all just added up to doing this. This is probably the first big risk I've taken ever. And it's definitely a little bit scary. But I'm confident and kind of barreling forward as best I can. And I'm finding that creativity has come back to me, that I lost a lot of productivity in the last year or more, spending a lot of time fretting and having imaginary arguments in my head and conversations, and wondering, how much more of this can I stand? And oh, here we are. But I do like that because he could get very fiery and inspirational, I think, when he wanted to.
Now, there's a song by Kim Ritchie, and it's called A Place Called Home. Now, I'm not going to quote the entire song and bore you guys with it, but
You can
I am
sing
going
it.
to. What's that?
Sing it.
Just sing it.
No, I'm not going to sing it either.
We'll provide beatboxing.
Yeah, I seem to recall you were going on about what a great karaoke performer you were the other week. So
That's when I was young.
Put up or shut up,
I'm
Davis.
no
Come
longer
on,
young.
let's go.
But he didn't say it was karaoke. What did he call it? Karaoke?
Karaoke, right. He was a great karaoke performer.
Whatever. Screw
Right,
all you
yeah.
guys. Anyway,
That's
here's
the title of Bartlett's next story, karaoke.
screw all the people on the Lovecraft eZine. It's going to sell 1 million copies. But here's one of the verses. I had a chance to settle down, get a job, and live in town, work in some old factory, but I never liked a foreman standing over me. I'd rather walk a winding road, rather know the things I know, see the world with my own eyes, no regrets, no looking back, and no goodbyes. So while we're talking about all this, I had to quote that song as well, Matt. So
Matt, I'd like to quote a song to you. Push it real good.
just do it. Nike says just do it.
Also, highway to the danger zone.
Oh my God.
Legend moves on from the Chippewa on down.
Whip it good.
Right.
John, please
He's got an
don't sing.
uncontrollable urge, Matt.
Please don't sing, John. Please.
And so you're back from outer
From
space.
outer space.
It's a total eclipse of the heart.
Is there?
At least he didn't do his Nickelback impression. I mean, we can be grateful for that, but you
Because
know.
I would do anything.
Oh my God. Oh my God. This show, I admittedly does not have high standards, but it has some standards. Okay.
Tell me why.
Oh my God.
So anyway, well, let's pretend
There's
to
no
focus
sun
on
up
Matt
in the
Bartlett
sky.
for a second. Matt, is 2 questions. Is there a book that you recommend new readers of yours start with? And do you have a favorite book yet that you've written, or are they all favorites in different ways?
First question. There are 2 books that I point people to if they haven't read me before. And if they want something very out there and strange and experimental, non-traditional, kind of wild, Gateways to Abomination is what I would recommend. And then if they're looking for something that's more traditional short stories, eerie stories, strange stories, then The Stay Awake Men and Other Unstable Entities is what I suggest.
That's such a great title, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah. That was based on an article about a DJ who did an experiment of trying to stay awake for as long as possible on the air, and with disastrous consequences that haunted him for the rest
That's
of
not
his life.
healthy.
It's not healthy. It's not a good idea. I sleep more than probably is healthy my own self. But as far as a favorite book, they're all favorites in this way or in one way or another. But I really like Creeping Waves, which is my longest book. It's this kind of a sequel to Gateways to Abomination. It includes my first longer short stories. It came in a burst of creativity where I just couldn't stop writing. And when I look at it now, I'm proud that I really I get a kick out of it. It's enjoyable. And Nathan Ballinger wrote the introduction for it, which was a great honor. I think it wouldn't be a bad one for people to start with, because it would bring them into that world. And also Nathan's introduction would give them an idea of the broader concept.
Yeah. Now, speaking to the audience, look, folks. If if you're a regular on this podcast, you're listening to this podcast and or watching it, then you're probably into weird fiction. I mean, you pretty much have to be. And you really should, all sarcasm, all kidding aside, you should be reading Matthew Bartlett. So, let's keep this guy in business and not let him
Wearing Matthew Bartlett, damn it.
That's right. There's clothing. There are action figures, as John alluded to earlier.
That's right. The action figure. Also, the dog with your head. What the hell is that, man?
That's all Eve Torini. Here's
Yeah,
the
sure.
dog.
Sure,
My head.
blame it on Eve. Yeah.
I blame it all on Eve. That was all him. He
was-
got a 3D printer and it drove him
God.
mad.
Yeah.
Okay, well, actually, this brings up that time in the show when we have a guest and we want to know what is all that cool stuff on the top of your bookshelf.
Okay. I
Good
can do that.
question.
Let me just be more ego, a little bust.
Oh, nice.
Oh, yeah.
Well, not a lot of people show their busts on this show. I want to be the first.
I don't think anybody has, actually. I think you are the first. Yeah.
Excellent. There's also my cat Larry, an action
Larry.
figure of him.
The most, should that be an inaction figure if he's a cat?
That's a really good point.
Hey, Langan, do you have a bust of yourself?
Look, this is sexual harassment, and according to the FCC, this is not the kind of thing you should be doing. All right?
I'm sorry.
Knock it off.
Okay, so the cool
Forgive
things
me.
on my shelf behind me. This gentleman,
Nice.
What's that?
it's kind of an Innsmouthian head that I got at Necronomicon. We also have a zombie, an evil clown. Every writer should have inspiration around.
And
got
an evil
Cthulhu.
clown, yes.
Yep, Cthulhu with a elven or Santa hat.
That looks like a gnome. A
I would
garden
think
Yeah, it looks like a gnome
yeah.
Cthulhu.
Yeah, it's kind of a Cthulhu gnome. Yeah,
that's
right.
exactly what I was
And then
thinking.
this weird thing that I got in Salem, his head comes off, as
What?
one would expect. Very
Oh.
curious.
Well,
guy.
if you want to get technical, all of our heads come off. It's just
It's true. This comes off really easily and goes back on, which ours usually don't. They
mine
don't go
does
back on
not
so
go
well.
back on for anyone who wants to know.
What they say is like you don't have to skydive the first time with a parachute,
That's right.
But you won't do it twice, yeah.
but you want to do it twice.
Yeah. All right. Anything else back there we should know about?
Let's see.
I've always been fascinated by that opening of Ray Bradbury Presents. He's going down into his basement and he's got all
yeah.
his toys.
Yeah.
Well, we have a cat,
An inaccurate cat skeleton.
an inaccurate cat skeleton. They are not this dark in color. And they don't
Great,
usually
now you
lighten.
broke it.
Tea light.
broke it.
Anyway, so that's some of what I have back there.
Do
A little
we
sampling.
have any more questions for Matt before we move on to part 2 of this show?
What's your next big project?
What's my next big project? I'm doing. I had a chapbook out called Rangel from Dim Shores, and that the story was illustrated. The chapbook was illustrated by Aaron Alfrey, who's one of my favorite artists, and the story appeared in Creeping Waves without the art. So two things. I'm doing a third edition of that with an additional 2-page spread of artwork by Aaron Alfrey, and I'm also writing a sequel to it. That I'm hoping to sell to Dim Shores to put out next year. And that and the chapbook subscription service are taking up a lot of my time. The chapbook is called the WXXT Program Guide, and it's a combination of fiction and strange radio program guide material that I'm still working on. But that's what I'm up to these days.
Bridget,
So-
do you have a special question for Matt?
Well, he kind of already told his origin story.
Oh,
so-
yeah. Well, yeah.
Go ahead,
Bridget's
Bridget, come
special
on.
question is, yeah.
What would be your superhero origin story?
My superhero origin story. I was, let's see. I was bitten by employment, and I don't know, radioactive job, And so I kind of became a mutant job where I am the boss and the human resources director and the annoying coworker and the fun coworker and the person you go out for drinks with afterwards. It's all me now. So that's the best I got for that.
So it's like the Leeds version of The Office is just you playing all those parts.
That's right, running back and forth between desks
Right.
and yelling at myself.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Are you talking to Patricia now, or
Say again?
reference to the M. Night Shyamalan movie? Are we talking to Patricia now, or?
Oh, right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Matt, you had to, for the Patreon, you had to do the Patreon to get to the program guide.
No. The Patreon is just separate. It's something that people can sign up for, and they get snippets of fiction and autobiographical stuff and cat pictures and just kind of whatever I feel like posting. That's an entirely separate thing.
Okay.
The chapbook service I'm selling through Square, the website Square, which is kind of a storefront that I've got set up. I link to it on the Patreon, but I link to it also on Twitter and social media.
All right.
And I also have T-shirts and mugs. I'm completely selling out on a different site that I also link to on my social media.
Okay.
I think I know the answer to this, but Chelsea on the live chat says, will Matt be doing any conventions? And you've been at quite a few now. I would imagine when we start doing conventions again, you'll be there, right?
Yes.
So
I love conventions, and every Necronomicon has been great. I've been to a couple reader cons, dropped in at Nikon. They're my favorite things to do.
any other questions for Matt before we move on, guys?
Yeah. Like I said, a two-part question. So
Sure.
who is a writer that like you don't get asked about? You know, we all go to Legati, let's say, or Paget, but who's a writer that you think, man, I wish someone would ask me about, you know, how important this person was to me?
Sure. I'll tell you about Tom Breen, who was a friend of mine before we were both writers.
John was sort of hoping you'd say John Langan, but go ahead.
I know, but he failed that test. All right, go on, Bartlett. Tell us about
Interesting thing about John Langan is John's book, Mr. Gaunt, was the first contemporary weird fiction horror book that I got, and it was given to me as a gift by Tom Breen, who I'm talking about right now.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
I
There's a
like
connection.
Tom Breen. He was a good friend of mine too, but go on.
But Tom was mainly friends with my brother through, punk rock and do-it-yourself music fan in the late 80s, early 90s. And he and I became friends. We went to concerts together and stuff. And he was reading the WXXT stuff in 2004 when I first started writing it. And he even did a couple of sort of stories in that vein that he showed me. And he is probably one of the best sort of quote unquote unknown writers. He has a bunch of stories that he wrote and never did anything with that would blow your minds. And I tried to persuade him all the time to publish these things. He does have one book available on Amazon called Orford Parish Murder Houses, which is like a guidebook to a sinister version of Manchester, Connecticut, which was incorporated as Orford Parish. And it's the story of these murder houses, and each one has a great, unique, original, very well told and very well written story connected to it. So Tom Breen, and I'm just going to throw some names of writers who I like and who I think people should read. Richard Gavin.
Yes.
Obviously, he's a pretty well-known figure.
Yeah, we had him on a couple of weeks ago, yeah.
Yep. And just a tremendous, very interesting individual and a great writer. There's a writer called Mer Winery, first name M-E-R, last name W-H-I-N-E-R-Y, who is based in Oklahoma, and his books of short stories are first rate. So I would highly recommend him.
Okay.
And Jonathan Rabb. Jonathan Rabb is the owner of Muzzleland Press, which published Creeping Waves, and a really great writer in his own right.
John, was there a second part to that question? Did you say?
Well, no, actually, I mean, the second part was to ask, like, who are some contemporary writers you would like to give a shout out to, but you've already
he did
done
that.
I kind of covered it. I kind of
Yeah.
answered your first question with an entirely different question that I hadn't heard yet. But yeah,
Thanks a lot, Bartlett.
I live to please.
We're going to get to the bottom of you before too long. Don't worry. Part 2 of this interview is coming up.
Well,
That's right. I've already
you know-
shown my bust. Now it's time to get to the bottom.
John,
Oh my God.
if that was FCC harassment too, you'd be in trouble now too.
What?
Getting to his bottom. It's just, come on, restrain
You
yourself.
and your filthy mind, Carpenter.
Right. You know, in a world where a lot of horror writing is, let's face it, a lot of horror writing is more or less the same. And, it doesn't mean that I don't enjoy, not the current stuff. It doesn't mean that I don't occasionally enjoy rereading an older Dean Koontz book or, things of that nature. But Matthew Bartlett is different. He's a different kind of horror writer, and different is very, very good when it's written well, and it is written well. So, check out his books, buy them, keep him in business, because we want him to keep writing. So, selfishly, we would like for that to happen.
Very, very kind of you, and I'm lucky to know you guys and John and Laird Barron and Nathan Ballingard have been so welcoming to me when I was brand new, and I just admire the work those writers do so much, and it's great to be in that group and doing that work and with people I admire so much.
But the question is, have you done this yet? Check this out, guys. An author has, have any of you heard of this? An author has hidden a short story inside 1,000 copies of his book. So what he did was he signed 1,000 copies, and this is a book called The Apparition Phase. I haven't looked it up. I don't know what it's about, by a fellow by the name of Will McLean, MacLean. And what he did was, of the 1,000 books, for example, I'm looking at a picture right now, number 344 out of 1,000, and below that is one word. And so if you put all the words from each of these books together, there's a short story that's hidden, which I think, I've never heard of this. This is a really cool idea.
So they're going to have like a place where people, if you've got that copy, you post that word.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would so post the wrong word.
I think you're supposed to show a picture of the inside cover. So, but I just thought that was really interesting. You guys haven't heard about this?
I heard about it.
Yeah.
Cool
I haven't heard
idea.
of that, but I feel like, didn't Shelley Jackson do something like that?
Did she?
Maybe in the early 2000s or something like that. I can't remember the exact details, but I do think it's been done like once before anyway. So.
Yeah. Well, at any rate, it's a pretty cool idea. So, yeah, I'm sure those 1,000 books are spoken for, but I wanted to mention it.
About 15 years ago, the author John Dunning, who ran a bookstore out of Boulder, he released a book and he fingerprinted copies, and people were going desperately trying to get five copies so they get it all the finger. But he shorted the Fickle Finger of Fate. So he made those copies specifically rare.
So now all of you writers out there, you have a way to sell more books.
And then what he did was, in his contract, he made it so that they could, if they remaindered the book, he got first right of refusal of buying all the copies. So he prevented the book from going onto remainder tables.
And why would you give away your fingerprints, though? In this,
Yeah, really.
digital identification. Oh, here, have my thumbprint. Sure.
Right.
Why don't I just write my bank account number underneath?
Yeah, here's my social too. While we're at it,
Right, exactly. And here's my mother's maiden name and my first childhood pet.
You give a little bundle of saliva away with each chatbot.
Exactly right.
Well, in the old days, people would put instructions for how to find a hidden golden dragon or something.
Yeah, the Kit Reed stuff, or the Kit. Yeah, I remember what. Yeah. So for Christmas, my wife got ourselves and all our children Ancestry.com saliva tests.
And
well, so we had to sit down with our kids and say, "Look, here's the deal. You can do this, and it's great, but your DNA is going to be on file someplace."
Well, that's Ancestry.com is the Mormon Church, and they want to do a genealogy of the entire world.
Right.
That's their shtick.
But
so I don't think while you think about it, is someone going to use it for insurance purposes or something like that? I think, their purpose is just they have this concept of a total global genealogy.
Right. Other services have been used by the FBI to find serial killers.
Yes, sir. I did mine through 23andMe.
Yeah, your DNA is accessible by the FBI.
Yeah, right. Well, see, I'm like 5% Romanian. So now I wear a cape and fake fangs when I walk around the house because I figure I am related to Dracula.
It would have been awesome if after he said I did 23andMe, the FBI had burst in and they were like, yeah.
That's like people who say, "Oh, I'm 5% Viking." That's kind of the same thing as saying I'm 5% dentist.
But it's different if you're related to Dracula.
Well, you get into a debate over whether Transylvanians are Hungarians or Romanians.
It's Romanian, of course, because I'm Romanian.
Yeah.
And the historical Dracula was a Wallachian to begin with.
In Romania.
Yeah.
Well, I seem to recall that there's a certain percentage. I had a coworker who did one of those ancestry tests, and he showed up like 1%, maybe Mongolian or something like that.
Yeah, because almost everybody's descended from Genghis Khan.
Right, because all of those troops pushing westward just kind of, raped their way across the Central Asia into Europe. And
I'm 0.1% sub-Saharan African.
Well,
I could tell.
Yeah.
As fascinating as that is, I'll move on to the next topic.
Just wait till Mike gets his DNA test, and then we're all going to have to listen to that. He's going to do.
No, he's just going to go to jail.
Never going to happen. About a week and a half ago, the miniseries turned 30, which made me think of, it's a bit dated, but done so much better than the recent movies, I think. Now, I did very much enjoy the first It movie a year or two ago. The second one was garbage.
Yeah, I shut it off a little ways.
I still haven't seen it. I would like to see it, but what everybody has said about it makes me think, maybe I'll wait till it's free someplace.
You're not missing anything. But the thing with the book and with the miniseries is that, well, here's an example. When was it Stanley, when he kills himself after receiving the phone call from Mike Hanlon?
Yeah.
And, in the bathtub, and he writes "it" on the wall. You don't know why, but all you know is that this must be something so horrifying that he would rather kill himself than go back to his childhood hometown. Brilliantly written by Stephen King, and they kept that format more or less in the It miniseries.
So you keep saying It miniseries. For every reasonable person on the planet, it's just It. And then there's the abominations that were filmed.
Yeah, well, I guess so. It was a miniseries, wasn't it?
Yeah, but we just call it It.
Or like the Tim,
well, I don't want to.
You could say, I mean, since we identify Tim Curry as Pennywise and that.
Right, the Tim Curry It.
Well, I could say It, and you might say, do you mean the book, the miniseries, or the movies? So that's why
Let me see the TV version.
Yeah, there you go.
That
works
would
too.
be acceptable too. Yeah.
But I mean, do you guys agree, disagree that as good as the first It movie was, the format of It TV and the book was better, so worked better as a
I
story?
think so. There were some really good things about the first movie, and there are probably some good things about the second one. I couldn't hang with it.
I couldn't either.
Yeah. And it's been a long time since I saw the TV version, but I remember it being pretty effective.
Well, the thing I think for me the problem with the more recent films, I had no problem with them adjusting the time frame. Okay,
Sure.
You want to have it that that's kind of clever in a way, but the monsters in the 80s were Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees and Michael Myers and Pumpkinhead and the Alien and Hannibal Lecter.
Right.
Those are the monsters that would have been chasing those kids, not like some weird lady in a painting. Obviously, there were copyright issues. They couldn't do that. But that seemed to me, one of the strengths, as I recall, and I haven't seen the Tim Curry version in a long time, but I seem to recall that the actual, Frankenstein's monster and all that are in that. Are in that. And it's love or hate the book. It's I think one of, at least what King is up to is to have this be like the monster mash. It's like every monster in the world is going to be in here, except German Godzilla. But even Rodan is in it briefly, and so it's very much this kind of monster fest, right? And I think that the movie. So Pennywise is a monster, yes, but he's like, part of she, I guess, is part of all these other things. When you get to the more recent one, I think that lack of that similar kind of, oh my God, look at all these monsters. I think that's a real problem. They have to lean too heavily on Pennywise, on what's his name, and Skarsgård, right? Bill Skarsgård does a fine job at it, but. I think that that fatally handicaps the movie. So
I hadn't thought about that. That's a good point, though. Yeah,
that's a good point. It makes me think about the fact that a lot of what the monster is playing on is their fears. And what I like about it, going back and forth in the novel and the miniseries of, okay, these grown-ups are afraid of things. Why are they afraid of these things? And then you learn it's because of those were their fears when they were kids. And because those fears were brought to life when they were kids, that's that trauma that now they're adults, they're connecting with that childhood trauma. But if you just see the second movie and with them all grown up separately, you're not as close to what happened to them as kids. You don't remember as much. It's harder to make that leap of like, oh, that was that character's trauma from when they were a kid because it was a whole movie ago.
Yeah, true.
Well, and I think as someone who grew up in the 80s, I mean, all those, Freddy Krueger, I mean, I remember the first Nightmare on Elm Street was playing in the local theater. And there were just all these stories about, this girl had to be carried out of it screaming. We didn't know, there's a tongue comes out of the phone and licks someone. We're like, oh my God, But also the threat, the sort of accelerated threat or heightened threat of nuclear war at that point. When was the day after release? Like 1983, I think that TV miniseries was released. So the idea, like even that could have been incorporated into the film. If you were like, okay, we don't have the money to get the rights to all these various serial killers. You probably could have got some cheaper ones though, I bet. But Slumber Party Massacre or whatever, you probably could have got that serial killer. But there were, I see it as a missed opportunity in a lot of ways. Although there were a lot of, the kids are great. Skarsgård is great. It's just, and I think also it was a mistake to make what's his name, the little boy who gets crunched at the beginning of the book, make, what is it? Georgie, right. To make his fate unknown through until the end of the movie. Because in King's novel, what's so powerful is that he's dead, and that the family is just devastated, and he's like brutally horribly murdered, and the movie just kind of backs away from that. And instead, it's like, is he alive or isn't he? No, let him be dead.
Yeah, and the other thing is
pretty gruesome depiction of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing is, and I don't know this because, like you guys, I turned the second movie off. I was just like, I'm wasting my life watching this piece of crap. But what I read was that the character of Mike Hanlon as an adult he's a drug addict.
Mm-hmm.
And look, this is an African American gentleman, and in the book and the 1990 miniseries, this guy is the one who made the sacrifice. He's the one who's stable, made the sacrifice to stay at home, to remain on guard.
He's the archivist. He's the one who keeps track of
right. You know, he was there for what was the gap? 30 years in the
27 years or something like that, right?
I'm sorry.
27 years, I think, is it? Or 28?
Yeah, so you know, almost 3 decades. This guy has been there, and you know, to make him a drug addict, and especially a African American drug addict, I don't know what the hell they were thinking.
Right.
But
part of me feels that what the movie really needed was it needed like just a gonzo director. It needed like Richard Stanley or the guy that did Mandy or something like that. Like someone who would just go just all out bizarre with it and just embrace the sort of utter insanity of it. Then you might have gotten something really, really interesting.
Well, speaking of scary movies, I recently watched, and Kelly Young recommended this to me, a movie called The Dark and the Wicked. Have any of you seen this?
Fantastic movie.
Isn't it?
No, but I'm planning maybe showing it at the next eZine movie night when I get a new computer.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic, and I'll throw my standard disclaimer out there. Don't read about it. Don't watch the trailer. Someone asked me about that the other day because I love movie trailers. Like you go to the theater and I don't want to miss the movie trailers. And I think with an action movie, with a comedy, with a thriller or whatever, a movie trailer is fine. But with a good horror movie, most of the time for the horror movie to be as effective as it should be, I don't think you should watch the trailer. So for anyone out there listening, for you guys who haven't seen it, that's my advice to you. But The Dark and the Wicked is a phenomenal movie.
It is, and I went in, as you suggested, with no knowledge. I didn't even read the little description on Amazon Prime or whatever platform we watched it on. And yeah, it was one of the more effective, not kidding around horror, just straight on horror movies I've seen in a long time. It was impressive. And my wife watches a lot of horror movies with me, and she usually doesn't, she likes some of them and parts of some of them. But this one, she really said, wow, they didn't do some of the goofy shit that you sometimes see in bad horror movies. It was just a really solid movie.
The other thing I think, if you're going to watch a good horror movie, you should watch it at night. You know, this is just Mike Davis's rules for watching horror movies. You know, don't watch the trailer, don't read about it. But it is more effective at night in a dark room, you know, than the sun's blazing outside and it's 1:30 in the afternoon. You know, I watched the very, very good Vast of Night. Would not classify that as a horror movie, but it's very, very suspenseful and very well done. And I think even better watched at night. So anyway,
I agree on all counts.
Okay. Well, if Bartlett agrees, then it doesn't matter what the rest of you think, except for Bridget. It matters what she thinks.
I want to do another movie shout out. We just watched last night, which was Final Prayer. It's not quite a found footage movie, but it sort of is.
I don't think I've seen that.
It's really good. Okay. It's about priests have been called to investigate a site that a quote miracle may have occurred at.
Okay. Well, that's all I want to know about it.
It is really it's just the ending. Wow, it's great.
All right. Final
Very
prayer.
enjoyable.
Okay, I might watch that tonight. Then.
It's on Prime.
All right. So on that note, yeah. Okay, so we got Final Prayer. We've got The Dark and the Wicked. Anybody else want to throw some movies out there horror movies out there that you've seen that you think we should see or the audience should see?
Now I'm going to draw a blank and just go to my go-tos, which are Kill List, House of the Devil.
House of the Devil is great. I still haven't seen Kill List.
Kill List is dark.
Yeah.
Dark. It's one of my
favorites. I love watching supernatural horror movies. I don't like watching serial killer horror movies.
Right.
For
Kill
example.
List is falls under the heading of cult / I think that I don't remember whether it's supernatural, but there's witchcraft involved. So
There's definitely like they're following certain kinds of like archetypal patterns, I guess you might say, when like you sort of so you could make the argument that there's something supernatural going on, but also maybe not.
Right.
House of the Devil is very good. Yeah.
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 What about Matt? How did you feel about A Field in England?
I loved it.
I haven't seen that.
Very, very strange movie. A lot to look at. It's not as plot driven. It's more like almost more like a Ligotti story in that it's you're not grounded in reality for a lot of it. But yeah, I thought that was very effective.
Yeah. I mean, I like pretty much all of Wheatley's stuff. I haven't seen the adaptation of Rebecca that he's done.
I haven't either.
It's an early film about two serial killers. This very, very black comedy. What is it called?
Caravan? Not Caravan.
Anyway, it's this.
Was it Sightseers?
Maybe Sightseers. Yeah. The setup is just that there's this man and this woman, and they're both serial killers, and they meet and they fall in love, and they take a little holiday through Britain. And it's just cringingly awfully funny.
I would imagine anyone within the sound of my voice has already seen this, but I just have to say again how effective I thought The Haunting of Bly Manor was. And what a great miniseries it was. And I did enjoy Haunting of Hill House up till the end, but I have no caveats on Bly Manor. I just thought it was great. So have you guys all seen it, I'm assuming?
Just the first episode and haven't gone on to the next one yet.
Oh, well,
I haven't seen it.
Oh, well, The Haunting of Bly Manor is very, very good.
Good.
So, any other movies you guys want to shout out about? No.
So there was Matt and I both watched Truth Seekers.
Yes.
Which isn't groundbreaking, but it's entertaining.
Yeah, I find it's got a slight supernatural component.
Oh no, it has a huge supernatural.
But the thing
Truth
is,
Seekers, is that one word or two?
It's
2 words, I think.
But
All
it's
right.
got Simon Pegg in it, so the supernatural part is quite nerve-wracking, and the assistant is acting just like I would, hiding under the bed and stuff. But it's also because it has Simon Pegg in it. There's bits of dialogue that are just so funny, and Malcolm McDowell plays this crotchety old dad who's just great.
Oh, I love Malcolm McDowell.
Malcolm McDowell steals the entire series.
100%.
It's a series, not a movie.
Yeah.
Is it on Prime?
It's on Prime.
8 episodes. It's on Prime. It's got really unnerving supernatural effects, and it kind of comes together into an overarching story. And it's really funny. It's really the perfect combination that I think Simon Pegg and Nick Frost and the director of Shaun of the Dead do so well. A melding of horror and humor that doesn't detract from either.
But Mike, you will like this. It deals with a number station.
Yes.
Oh, I will like it then.
Yes.
Yeah, I can see why Bartlett would like it too.
Yep.
Okay, I am convinced. All right.
And then,
Yes.
so yeah, that was really good. I also watched a show on Netflix called Evil.
Yes.
I've heard that's very good. Yeah, it looked so tacky, like the commercials for it or whatever. You know, like I was like, I don't know,
Look tacky,
but
yeah.
I've heard it's just great. Yeah.
Well, the thing with that one is my wife watched part of the first episode and she thought this shouldn't be good, and yet it is. And she noticed that it was by the creators of the show The Good Wife, which is a lawyer drama type of show.
All
So
right.
it's kind of got this gloss and sheen to it. And we watched it and we're like, all right, the first episode was good. Let's keep going. And it just gets better and better and better. And by the end, I was all in.
I think that what Evil does is that it actually has a rather mediocre story.
Mm-hmm. The premise is
Yeah, but I think the acting and the dialogue is much better than the story the characters were given.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it ends up exactly where I thought it would end up.
Right.
It telegraphs all of its punches. But to watch the characters, and the main character is the guy who played Luke Cage.
I thought so. Yeah. Yeah.
So
So does he punch the ghosts?
Yeah, kind of.
Sorry.
He's an exorcist. Well, but I think it's really, really well done. The fact that it's made by the same people that made The Good Wife explains to me the whole. There's a lot of lawyering going on.
Yes.
And what was Peter David's? Maybe even there was Tobias and Wolf, supernatural attorneys at law.
Oh, Wolfram and Hart and
No, not
sorry.
Buffy. Not Buffy. There was a comic book series.
Oh man, I don't know that one.
There were supernatural attorneys at law.
I am covered in shame. At least
Wolfram
I
and
think
Hart?
I am.
I'll have to go find it. And I keep thinking it's by Peter David, but it's not. So I'll find it and I'll send you the link, John.
Yeah, no, that'd be awesome. Thank
But
you.
yeah, there's a lot of lawyering going on. More lawyering than you would think.
Well, the devil lawyers,
But there's one episode that was really poignant to me. It's about a woman who captures a comedian and holds him hostage in her basement, trying to force him to admit that he was the radio jockey, the radio announcer, and the morning comedian during the Rwanda massacre.
Wow.
And he would encourage people to kill all the other tribes.
Wow. Okay.
Wow.
And she just recognizes his voice.
Well,
So, yeah.
as far as books go, I recently read a book called it's called Book of Shadows by Alexander Sokoloff. And I listened to most of it on Audible. And there are some really, really creepy scenes in that book that I can't get into without spoiling it. And it is available if you have Kindle Unlimited. You can read it for free. I do recommend the audio version too, though.
Who wrote
yes.
it?
Sorry,
Who wrote it?
Alexandra Sokoloff. So that's called Book of Shadows. Rob Atone. I'm sorry, Rob. I still don't know if I'm saying your last name right, but he was on a few weeks back. But he emailed me the other day and said he was listening to an episode where I talked about how much I like doppelganger stories. Well, he recommended a book to me called Video Palace: In Search of the Eyeless Man. As in no eyes, eyeless. And it's this, the eyeless man is apparently this sort of urban legend type character, like Slender Man, whatnot. And I'm really enjoying the book so far. So, Video Palace, In Search of the Eyeless Man. Check that out. And then, of course, we're going to have Max Stanton on next week. I'm really enjoying A Season of Loathsome Miracles by Max Stanton. And this is a collection, and it hooked me from the very first story, I have to say. There's a lot of good fiction out there. There is. There's a lot of good short stories out there. These are great short stories. These are incredible. Got my copy of Weird Horror in the mail magazine. Weird Horror #1. It's put out by Undertow Press, so make sure you guys pick that up. Ronald Malfi will be on the show in the new year, and he's got an upcoming book called Mr. Cables. So
this has gotten a lot of buzz
Yeah.
on the internet, as the kids say.
as the kids say today. I do have two extra copies, so I will be giving 2 copies of those away at some point in the near future. And then this is a book that I read some time ago called Thoughts of God, and it's by a guy named Michael Connelly, Kanally. It's a very, very good book, and it's very, very different. This guy called God is basically running an experiment, and the experiment is the universe. And it's interspersed with a serial killer mystery on Earth. Very hard to describe, but really, you should read it. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because he wrote another book. He's written several. He wrote another book called The Long Arms. Now, Pete, this article made me think of you from earlier this month. Neanderthals, this is on Science Alert. Yeah, Neanderthals made me think of me. Neanderthals and humans were at war for over 100,000 years, evidence shows. Now, of course, Neanderthals, contrary to public perception, weren't stupid. They had bigger brains than humans, even modern humans. But I think it's fascinating to think about 2 different types of humans that were on the earth for tens of thousands of years. And eventually Homo sapiens wiped the Neanderthals out.
Or bred with them, but yes.
Yes, well, the really interesting thing, it's a very interesting article. You can look it up at Science Alert. Again, the title is Neanderthals and Humans Were at War for Over 100,000 Years. And it's an interesting article to read, but what it made me think of was a book that I read some time ago by this same guy, Michael Connelly. And it's called The Long Arms. And, Pete, you're always saying, first person, who are they telling the story to? Which is a fair question. This is written in the first person by the very last Neanderthal on Earth.
See, you love this stuff because you like Man from Earth.
Yeah.
You love that film.
Yeah.
You love this whole. Yeah.
Can I mention a short story that I read when I was like maybe 10 or 12? It was in an Isaac Asimov collection where he took his favorite stories from the magazine The Unknown. And this story dates from the 30s or 40s. It's by L. Sprague de Camp. It's called The Gnarly Man, about this guy who's working in a circus as a freak, but he's actually a Neanderthal who has lived for like 50,000 years. And he just has to hide himself among people because he doesn't smell the same, so dogs don't like him. He has to wear heavy cologne. He's got really different body hair, and it's just about how he's managed to know when to move on and when to escape to a different location.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just this fascination with perhaps one of our forebears walks amongst us. That's been around.
I
What?
think Philip Jose Farmer wrote a novel about Neanderthals living in cities, but just as street people, as bums.
Well, this
It was a
is
short story called The Alley Man.
That's it. Thank you.
this is written
Also,
from the
there was
this is written from
Joan
the standpoint
Crawford's,
of
Trog.
Frog.
Trog. There we go. Her last film. She's
For
trying
Hammer.
to talk to a caveman. You know, she's trying to civilize him, and you can sort of see the despair on her face that this is what her career has come to. But
well, this
That
this
appeared
is
on
writ-
a double feature with Taste the Blood of Dracula.
nice. She probably would have had more fun in Taste the Blood of Dracula.
All right, finish up, Mike. You lost your train of thought?
this is written from the standpoint of the very last Neanderthal, a long, long time ago. And it starts off with, I am alone. Not like the hunter who finds himself separated from his spear mates. Not like the young one caught in a sudden blizzard while gathering wood. Not even, I suppose, like an elder turning to find a once familiar forest path, suddenly confusing and unknown. No, it is the kind of alone that goes deeper, pulling at the very heart of a person. And he goes on to, talk about how much he misses his tribe and other people. And interestingly enough, this part made me think of you as well, Pete. He goes, and when the wind and snows blot out the moon and stars, I tell stories to the shadows and the spirits who find their way to my small beacon of light. I comfort myself knowing even shadows and spirits benefit from a warm fire and an old story. So that's who he's telling the story to. But it's just very poignant that we aren't descended from Neanderthals. It was a separate branch of humanity. And this is the very last one. Now, did it happen this way? Very doubtful. But the author's trying to make a point, and it's a really good read. This one is also available on Kindle Unlimited. Again, it's called The Long Arms by Michael Canali, Kanally. So,
It's very interesting because if we separated from chimpanzees like 6 million years ago, approximately, we share genetically, on average, like 98.5% of our DNA with a chimpanzee. So, but there are other branches of the hominid bush it was like splitting off at all times. That's why you have Australopithecus afarensis and all these other species that once lived. So we've always had cousins walking around.
right.
But I think it's really hard to say they were all rubbing elbows because there were so few in such a vast physical area. So how much did the Homo sapiens truly interact with the Neanderthal? I think it would be very difficult to say. And probably what happened is they simply outcompeted them with superior language skills, cutting them off from resources. And
Yeah, it
so
could
they
be.
dwindled.
But, Neanderthals could see better in the dark, apparently. Were stronger. They had speech. They had the ability to make fire.
There's William Golding's the second novel that he wrote. So after he finished Lord of the Flies, he wrote this novel called The Inheritors, and it's historical fantasy, I guess you might say,
Mhm.
and it's from the point of view of a group of Neanderthals, and they all have very simple names, and they're sort of an idealized society, but it's about their first encounter. It's a first contact story because it's about their first encounter with us. And we are terrifying to them
Yeah.
because, among other things, we lie, and that call it an evolutionary adaptation, or that gives us this terrifying advantage to them, and we're deceitful. So now whether I don't claim truth for any of this, but simply it's an interesting look at how maybe it was our superior language skills as well. I mean, the Neanderthals may have had language, but it may not have been, or they may not have used it in the ways that we continue to use language.
Yeah, I've heard this argued so many times. It's like the difference. It's like what really makes a human, because animals are a lot closer than you think. It's like in terms of like everything that people do, animals also do to a degree or another. You know, primates are non-primates, but it's no other animal has symbolic representation in their head. They don't have symbolic speech. And that's probably what really distinguishes our competitive advantage.
Well, let me just say that these two books, I've not, and these are not horror. Okay, I'm not saying that they are. I'm just saying that they're different and they're interesting. And I've not read another author like this guy. This guy, these are two just very different books. Thoughts of God and The Long Arms. They're kind of apples and oranges. So I was about to say which one I prefer, but I can't. But I started with Thoughts of God, so maybe start there. It's just, I can't recommend it highly enough. And I believe that Thoughts of God is available on Kindle Unlimited as well. But as far as that one, I would recommend you buying the print version, just because there are different formatting for different sections of the book, like the interludes that show something happening on a distant planet, and then the action goes back to the serial killer situation on Earth. So, you know, I guess that's all I can say other than please read them, folks. And if you read them, let me know what you think. Send an email to lovecraftezine@gmail.com. So let me know what you think of them.
Was it F. Paul Wilson who did the series? It was a short series of books where Europeans discover the Americas and they're filled with Neanderthals, and they end up enslaving them.
That doesn't ring a bell with me.
I don't think that's by Wilson.
Okay, gotta remember.
Was it Eater of the Dead by Michael Crichton?
Yes, Eater of the Dead was about Neanderthals.
Mm.
That was the 13th Warrior.
Yes.
As a movie.
Yeah, good movie. Only thing I got left is
you sent me this to read, and I'm reading it.
What is it?
It's called Screens. It's by Christopher Lane, Laine.
Yes.
And it starts off at this really, really paranoid rant about the manuscript, and you can't get the manuscript. It has to be given to you. You can't buy it, and you can't. It's forbidden to put it onto. If you try to digitize it, it will destroy your computer. And it's hand copied and sent around. And it's like, okay, what the hell am I reading? Blah blah. And then all of a sudden, I get into it, and then I'm into the next chapter, and it says, I don't remember when I first came in contact with the name of Halpin Chalmers. I'm like, whoa, wait, what?
Chalmers?
Chalmers.
Frank Belknap Long.
Is two Frank Belknap Long stories.
Well, I believe the publisher emailed me wanting me to promote it. And I was like, Pete and I have struck this agreement where he will help me with if someone does that, is it worth the read? Is it worth promoting? And so I had him send the book to Pete instead of me. So is this a thumbs up or a thumbs down, Pete?
I am about a third of the way through. I'm really enjoying it.
Okay.
It is, I think it's a sequel to The Hounds of Tindalos, but I think it might also be a sequel to The Space Eaters.
Who's the author again?
Christopher Lane.
And it's called Screens. So not Screams, Screens.
Screens.
Okay.
Yeah, and it has to, you're not allowed to put the manuscript on anything that has a screen. Television, computers, your phone, and you have to turn your phone off while you're reading the manuscript.
Did you?
Well, of course.
Without going into grisly detail, I can see how that could be a sequel to The Space Eaters right away.
Yes. And so, yeah, I think it's a sequel to The Space Eaters, which would make it a Lovecrafty novel. Now, it's the number 4 of the 7 Coyne's Drowning series, which is this loose collection of stories inspired by the 7 Deadly Sins. So I don't know if all the other books are Lovecraftian or not.
I can't remember if this book is out yet or not.
I think it's been delayed, I think, until at least January 2021.
Hey, Pete, I mean, when I go back, I reread The Hounds of Tindalos for like the first time in 20 odd years, a few years ago. And I was struck that it was like Long actually goes back to say it was like an original sin.
Right.
Almost. And to me, that was like, well, isn't that kind of Christian? And it's like, but then I thought, well, I guess you could look at it as like more than that. It's like in evolution, you had a choice A or B, and they went B and we went A.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
The Space Eaters also had Christianity. And the cross is used to ward off space monsters.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
so
yeah,
I'm gonna flip that and say we have Peter Watts coming up very, very soon.
Mm-hmm.
He has an explanation for why the cross affects monsters.
Vampires particularly.
And if you haven't gone to his website and watched the PowerPoint presentation and essentially it's a TED Talks on monsters, you really need to do this.
That's where I got the idea, like in the Hounds of Tindalos, where it's like in remote evolution, it was choice A or choice B was like the choice was this one bacteria metabolized sulfur different than all other life.
Yeah,
right.
Peter Watts will be on the show on January 3rd.
Yeah.
So.
But yeah, if you guys get a chance, if anybody, go to his website and you have to scroll through it a bit, but he has essentially a fake TED Talk on genetics and monsters. And it is one of the most terrifying things I've ever seen because it's just straight corporate language.
He's also a trained biologist.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that makes his fiction very ring true.
And one of the things I like about Peter Watts' fiction and his aliens is that they are intelligent, but they may or may not be sentient.
Right.
You can be in charge of interviewing Peter Watts that day, Pete.
Oh, Jesus.
Okay. Well, now the other thing is, if you want to read a super Lovecraftian story.
Things?
No. The Island.
Oh, The Island, yeah.
I think that is just so... It's not anything mythos. There's no mythos monsters. It's just about the vastness and strangeness of space and intelligence.
Cosmic horror, basically.
It is. It's bloody brilliant.
Yeah, but the whole idea that and this goes back to this one of the things that I think is really, really great about good science fiction. The idea that there are other minds, other brains that think about the universe in a way that we can't and can never understand, but they still function.
Right.
And not only that, but they can do things that we can't do because they think about the universe differently. But they are also just as terrified of us because we think differently and can do things that they can't. I think that's a really interesting idea.
I see The Island online, but I don't see it. I don't think I've read this one. Is it a short story?
Yeah, it's a short story. I got it in one of his collections. I don't remember.
If you guys find out which collection that's in, please let me know.
All right.
All right, we got to run. Buy Matthew Bartlett books because Matt no longer has a job, and you guys need to read his work.
I'm sorry, Matt. I should never have brought that up.
That's okay.
I was going to bring it up anyway. Plus, okay, we kid around, but dude, this guy's a really great writer.
He is.
Let's keep him in business,
Absolutely.
So anyway, thanks to all of you for being here. And we will see you next week with
Wait,
Max
wait.
Stanton.
Prize.
Go ahead, Prize.
Remember, if you want Killing Pikmin, the library copy sticker, send an email to ezineprizes@gmail.com and put Pikmin in the subject heading. We'll pick a winner in about 3, 4, 5 weeks, something like that.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Good to see you,
Thank you
Matt
very
Bartlett.
much. Thank you.
Talk to you soon.
Yes.